Hi, this is the first video supplement for Government 006 Introduction to International Politics. What I want to do is talk a little bit about something I glossed over in the lecture on constructivism, and this is the notion of typifications and the way that typifications relate to constructivist theory. In brief, when we talk about typifications, we're talking about representations of the world. And in constructivist theory, it is often representations of the world, that is literally representations, that do a lot of work in explaining political outcomes. In their pioneering work, The Social Construction of Reality, Peter Berger and Thomas Luckman argue that most human knowledge consists of typifications, generalizations or stereotypes about other people, the world, political life, and so forth. Most of these typifications are not the result of direct experience. We learn them from the testimony of others, from our parents, peers, teachers, or a variety of scientific, religious, and political authorities. Many of us, for example, do not have direct proof that the world is round. We know the world is round because we are told it is by people whom we trust, those, for example, who have circumnavigated it or have seen it from orbit. Similarly, most of us gain our knowledge of foreign countries from journalists, scholars, and other people who have been to those places, who testify to the fact that these countries do in fact exist, and who tell us about the politics, beliefs, and customs of the people who inhabit them. To quote C. Wright Mills, "The first rule for understanding the human condition is that men live in second-hand worlds. They are aware of much more than they have personally experienced, and their own experience is always indirect. Their images of the world and of themselves are given to them by crowds of witnesses they have never met and never shall meet. In this sense, a great deal of politics relies upon, operates through, and produces representations." President George Bush's famous address after Al-Qaeda's attacks on New York and Washington, D.C., was itself a representation of the events. It drew on representations from the media and intelligence communities about the attacks themselves, relied on representations of America and the world deeply ingrained in American political culture, and presented a representation of the meaning and significance of the attacks that it then tied to specific courses of action, such as the imminent invasion of Afghanistan. Now, there are many differences between the kind of representations involved in a politician's speech and that of, say, for example, a fictional television program, but many of these differences are ones of degree. The former might be thought of as a first-order representation. It seeks to directly represent political events. In this terminology, television and print journalism are also examples of first-order representation. Although a speech by a politician is often a representation of facts and narratives reported in the media, both claim to be direct representations of the real world. Popular entertainment usually takes the form of second-order representations, in that its narratives represent elements of social and political life through a layer of fictional representation, explicitly fictional. If a politician is always a kind of actor, attempting to convince us with her speeches, act presidential, or feel our pain, as Clinton often said, then a professional actor playing a politician is an actor portraying an actor. So, in that sense, it's not only first-order representations that build the cultural typifications by which we understand the world and think about how we ought to behave towards it, whether as individuals or as leaders of governments or as representatives of the state, but it's also arguably a whole set of popular and mass cultural artifacts, things that shape the way we understand the world that are themselves fictional representations and yet still create a whole variety of typifications about how, and norms, for example, about how politicians really ought to behave, about what politics is really like, about what is good, what is evil, what it means to be an American, what it means to be an Israeli or a Jordanian or to be a Chinese citizen. And all of these things contribute to a kind of web of meaning that for constructivists filters how we engage with the world and the kinds of rules of thumb that we pragmatically use to understand events, to make sense of them, and then to react to them, or to drive events, or to otherwise act upon the world.